The DC Community Heritage Project is a program of the Humanities Council of Washington, D.C. and the DC Office of Historic Preservation. The initial idea for this, and we've been doing this now for 4 years, came from Patsy Fletcher and a group of, I guess what we call grassroots preservationists, who were like you tonight, in love with Washington, D.C. and in love with their neighborhoods, interested in sharing their stories and learning the best ways to preserve and promote their neighborhoods. Since 2004, the DC Community Heritage Project mission has been to provide information, training, and financial resources to people living in Washington, D.C. who care about presenting and preserving their history. And so we convene at least twice a year. We maintain a listserv. We're developing an online resource directory, and I hope that all of you will consider becoming a part of that. Since 2007, we've provided small grants for neighborhood people and organizations who want to tell their stories. And so tonight, we showcase the second group of DC Community Heritage Project grantees. From Councilmember Kwame Brown's office, Charles Mason.
2 years ago, the council member called me, and I was sort of in between a couple of things. He called me to his office. He says, Charles, he says, I'm young enough to have a vision for what DC should look like, but I'm not old enough to know what it was. Will you come work for me? So what I am saying is I work for a young man who values history, values the commission, values, of course, the wonderful board chair you have over here in Don Murray, and wanted me to come here and say thank you for all the efforts that this commission, as well as the heritage that y'all continue to pass on. It is not the matter of how much you put in a grant. It is not how much you say. We are in a world, as the council member says, where there is a disconnect between our youth. And the disconnect is the history of the Washington, D.C. and the neighborhoods that have created. I encourage you to continue. The council member applauds your efforts and continues to say that history comes in small package. Continue to produce the history that you have generated, continue to pass it on. I myself believe in look back, see the future. Because if you really look back, you'll see the future of Washington, D.C. So on behalf of Councilmember at-large Kwame Brown, thank you very much and continue on.
Okay, I'd like to introduce the Director of the Office of Historic Preservation and our State Historic Preservation Officer, Mr. David Maloney.
This is the second one of these that we have had with the Humanities Council. So after that first symposium, I decided that our office, which does have grant funds that we get from the National Park Service, I decided that we should put some more money into this program. It was a great thing that we can do in terms of our office broadening our participation in the community and in community history to make everyone in the city realize that we do a little bit more than just processing building permits and telling people, no, you can't do this, and here's how to replace your windows and all that stuff. We do things that really respond to the city in other ways. So we're very proud of this program.
I'm delighted to introduce our keynote speaker for the evening, Mr. Brian Joyner of the National Park Service.
Simply, what I do is I do historic preservation work for the National Park Service. And the whole idea of historic preservation, when I say that to people, most people kind of cock their heads at me sideways and wonder, give me that look like, what are you talking about? But what we're really talking about is we're talking about people, we're talking about places, we're talking about the significance of place and how people interact and how that impacts them. So the Cultural Resources Diversity Program is a program I work with. And we look at the idea that, very simply put, historic preservation, heritage preservation should look like the people who live in those neighborhoods. The one thing that I've had the opportunity with working with this program to see is that The power of preservation, the power of history with a small h, is in that people like you all who are here in this room become engaged. And you know, the saving of historic places starts with someone being offended about the fact that something in their neighborhood is leaving. That's where it begins. The preservation movement in the United States really begins with the Mount Vernon Ladies Association, but they were really upset that someone was going to buy George Washington's house and tear it down. It wasn't about George Washington as this icon and that this house would meant so much to them prior to someone wanting to tear it down. And there are preservation stories like that all around the United States that really get to the heart of what we're getting here, and that is how a neighborhood impacts you in your life. One of my biggest pet peeves is that there's this idea that nobody is from Washington, and nobody in Washington really cares what happens with Washington. Washington, the monumental city. Everyone cares about, you know, the White House. Everyone cares about the Capitol. People come to town, they go see those things, they hit the monumental core, they may dip off somewhere here and there. If they know someone in Washington, they may wind up somewhere, and that's about it. So, you know, when people start looking at Washington and they want to put their stamp on it, they want to put someone else's stamp on it. They want to put New York stamp on it. They want to put Chicago stamp on it. Washington has its own stamp. And these projects that you all have been working on, and I applaud you on these projects get to the heart of what Washington is, the significance of place. I used to work at the Historical Society of Washington, D.C. a while ago. And during my time there, I worked on a project called Growing Up in Washington. But we interview people all over the city about growing up in Washington. And you know, everyone has a story about the mall, and everyone has a story about some of the big history places in Washington. But most of the stories weren't about those places. They were about the little neighborhood park or the elementary school that people went to, or to whatever theater it was they went to spend time in the summer, or the swimming pool. And those sorts of things, the significance of those places are what resonated through those stories. So I'm going to cut it short because I want to hear what you all have to say. I thank you very much for letting me come to speak in front of you. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Javier Barker, and I'm a member of the Eastern Garden Flower Club. I moved in the neighborhood about 4 years ago, and talking to the neighbors, I heard people talking about that the houses in the neighborhood were designed and built by African Americans. That was very interesting to me, but at the same time, I had my doubts. So I started to talk to several members in the neighborhood, and we formed a group to go and do the study and review to find out exactly what it is all about, the Eastland Gardens. In 1928, the Eastland Garden Incorporation purchased property in that area of old Benning Road tracks and decided that they were going to create residential area houses for the community. By 1955, we found out that there are about 99 houses were designed by African Americans and about 105 were built by African Americans. Under research we did the history development of the community. Also, we found information about the early residents and outstanding residents. One of those outstanding residents is Ms. Rudine Davis. Ms. Rudine Davis was the person who initiated the Eastland Gardens Flower Club. In photographs, we photographed all the houses in Eastland Gardens that we found out that they were designed and built by African Americans. In the brochure, I have all the information. In reference to the architects and builders, the most prolific architects in Eastland Gardens we have is Louis Giles Jr. He designed 45 houses. Alonzo Plater designed 20 houses. We have additional architects such as Romulus Archer, who designed 8. Augustus Bull designed 8. John Holloway 8, and the numbers goes on and on. A neighborhood has a story to tell. The other thing that we have learned that if you approach people asking them questions, they're willing to tell you as long as you let them know what you're looking for. And the other thing that we'll discover is never discard anything that you have. You're amazed to find that in attics, you can find all kind of information. And we would like to acknowledge the Community Heritage Project for giving us this chance to present this information that we consider that is very important to us. And also, this effort was funded by the assistance of the Humanities Council of Washington, D.C. Thanks.
Well, first I would like to say thank you to the Humanities Council of Washington for this invitation tonight and also for its financial support that made possible this project, the first edition of the Latino Cultural Guide in Washington, D.C. Fiesta D.C. is located in As Morgan. It's a cultural group. We started as a new group in 2004 with the idea to reestablish the Latino Festival. We needed to do more than a festival, more than a 1 day of taquitos, pupusas, and salsa merengue. So we have the idea of doing different things. But in our group, we have persons that are really long residents of Washington. They know the history. And of course, during these meetings, they told us we need to do something in terms, not just a festival, but to preserve our history, our culture. So that's the reason we published this guide.
It's a pleasure to be back, part of this activity of the Humanities Council among people who find purpose and meaning in researching and documenting the commonalities and varieties of all of us who make up humanity. We had proposed to dedicate one full illustrated page to each of the performers and performing groups. We budgeted accordingly, made arrangements with a printer. The first part of the project involved publicizing it and contacting the performers, requesting from them summaries, photographs, and contact information, letting them tell their own respective stories. Sometimes we searched ourselves for the information we needed. When the submissions were not usable or not returned in time, we turned to interviews over the phone with the principals of the respective groups to glean the information needed. We confirmed the generalization that working with musicians is like herding cats. It was no easy task to collect, confirm, and edit all of the information obtained, which in many cases also had to be translated into English. We found that life does not organize itself into obvious categories, and that part of our work had to be first to determine a conceptual and organizational framework. Now, the guide followed also an unstated agenda. We wanted to convey as well that we could, within the space and format available, a sense that Latin American music is much more complex than a simple breakdown into salsa, merengue, cumbia, and Mexican. We wanted the reader to get a sense of the varied cultural roots of the region, and not just among the Native American peoples who largely define the regions of the continent, but also among the African cultures that are represented in Latin America and Caribbean culture, and within Spain itself, which even today is hardly a homogeneous cultural entity. We hope that readers would rethink their conceptions of Latin America, and that the guide would help you to better understand a growing sector of the population that is now a recognized part of the mix of cultural influences that make up the District of Columbia. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank the Council.
I'm really proud that we have among this group of grantees young people with this kind of interest in history and in historic preservation. So it's a real delight for us to start this session with them. Thank you.
And so first I'll tell you a little bit about Radio Roots. We are a youth media education organization. We teach youth radio and journalism and media. We believe that the media should be as diverse as our country is, that true social justice won't happen until all are adequately represented in the media. We created a 30-minute audio documentary called Revolution Rewind. And since we work with youth, we're very youth-driven. Our project did change over the course, but what it ended up being is three audio pieces that makes a 30-minute documentary, and it focused on 3 moments in history in Washington, D.C., and it's a history of youth organizing. The first is in the 1960s, the dance show Teen-A-Rama. The second is remembering the Mount Pleasant riots of the 1990s. And the third is more recent, in the 2000s, a youth campaign to change the school lunch program for the better.
In our current campaign, focuses a lot around counselors. Since a lot of teachers got fired, and the counselor rating is very low, and it's roughly about like 300 students to 1 person. We're working to get more counselors back into school so that the youths have somebody to rely on as far as anything comes, like when, you know, getting towards your 12th grade year and trying to get out of high school to enter college.
Step 2, before we got into the actual nuts and bolts of the documentary, was we taught them about media, and we call it media literacy. We taught the youth to be critical analyzers of the media. And so I'm going to pass the mic again one more time to give an example of what that means.
Well, we had a guest speaker come in and teach us just how to read between the lines a little bit, because TV plays a big part in a lot of teenagers' social behavior. We learned the history, like how things used to be to how it is now, so it just kind of, it changed a couple of people's perspective, analyzing and reading between the lines and just using basically what I learned over the summer and applying it to my everyday life.
Step 3 was research. Did lots of research for this. The internet, libraries, museums. They went on field trips. They took field trips in Georgetown of a walking tour of Georgetown. Step 4 was learning how to work the equipment. The youth talked to a variety of people for the different parts of their documentary. Some of the people, one was Beverly Lindsay Johnson, Reginald Luckett. Olivia Cadaval was a mentor during the Mount Pleasant riots. So they had a lot of exposure to a lot of people involved. The next step is step 5, interviewing. So how you ask the questions, preparing to ask questions, get as much information from the people that you're trying to get information from as you can.
I actually interviewed Miss Johnson about the documentary that she did with Teen-A-Rama, and before I actually interviewed her, I had to learn about how to ask the questions, like, and learn about the different types of questions, like open-ended and closed-ended questions and follow-up questions, to get as much out of the interview as I could.
The next part of the documentary was they compiling it all. We give them all the tools and know-how to write the documentary, and they put this thing together, and it's fantastic. And we're going to play you just a little bit, just a couple minutes.
If you've seen Soul Train and the movie Hairspray, those productions will give you a good idea of what Teen-A-Rama, DC's own 60s teen dance show, was about. The show is a part of the history of DC's hand dance. For those who don't know about hand dance, it's a variation of Chicago stepping, Detroit ballroom, and swing that involves gliding footwork and constant hand contact with a partner. 10 years ago, Beverly Lindsay Johnson produced a documentary about the history of DC hand dance, which led to the production of Dance Party, the Teen-A-Rama story.
In doing the documentary, which was called Swing, Bop, and Hand Dance, as I was talking to people or residents of the District of Columbia about how they learned how to hand dance. People started telling me about this show that used to be on television called the Tina Rama Dance Party, and that it came on an all-black television station, WOOK, Channel 14. It doesn't exist now. But back in the 60s, the TV station was like the first station in the nation to program for the black audience.
Basically, I just got out how to properly interview people and how to speak correctly when I'm interviewing people. I took away just getting a lot of knowledge about what went on back on in the days when when we when African Americans had their own TV show, like how good it must have felt to know that y'all just had that, you know, one thing dedicated to y'all, and that was just kind of like the birth of what it has grown into now, and just made me appreciate, you know, what we do now and what we take for granted.
We want to give a special thanks to the Humanities Council and the rest of our funders that helped us to do this. They were two of a dozen youth that came together to put these documentaries together. Youth from around the city, like Anita goes to Wilson High School and Margaret goes to Anacostia High School, and then there were youth in between that came together to do this. And so just want to thank you for having us here. It was fantastic, and appreciate it.
We came together about 3 years ago as a small group to not only map the boundaries of Woodridge, but what we wanted to do, we wanted to publicize the rich heritage of a Woodridge community. What we did initially, we met and decided that we were going to get together a Woodridge history project. So what we did, we first did the research and found out that Woodridge has a lot of historical sites. And the first one to start with was William Taft Junior High School. And a lot of y'all have passed by Taft a lot and and have observed the tennis courts right off of South Dakota Avenue. During the summer, there's a lot of baseball games. There's a lot of activities going on in Taft. And so it's one of the historical sites in Woodridge, which I think everybody can appreciate in that area. Next, we have Archie Edwards Barbershop. There was a guitar player by the name of Archie Edwards. He was born in 1918, and he died in 1998. He was a blues man, teacher, barber, and storyteller. In 1959, he bought his barbershop on Bunker Hill and began his work to teach people about Piedmont blues and keep the tradition alive. Edwards was a fixture in the community while playing, singing, and spreading the message of the blues tradition. The site is on the African American Heritage Trail. This is our map and our boundaries, which is bounded by Eastern Avenue, Michigan Avenue, Bladensburg Road, and 17th Street. Well, 18th Street actually is one of the boundaries, and New York Avenue. This is an old engine company. This engine company was built in 1908 and is designed by A.B. Melliott and Sons. It is the most domestic of DC's firehouses designs. A half-timbered 16th century English manor house with modifications for accompanying fire equipment. It is on the DC Inventory of Historical Places and the National Register of Historic Places. This firehouse now exists and is almost in a terrible state of dilapidation. It is located on between 22nd Street and 20th Street and 22nd Street on Franklin Northeast. This is the National Lutheran Home for the Aged, and the National Lutheran Home for the Aged began as a bequest in 1890 from Mrs. Cyril Utermal, a devoted Lutheran who wanted the establishment of a home for the care of the elderly. The first building was dedicated in 1894. By 1913, however, it has become the National Lutheran Home, and the cottages were replaced by the large brick edifice seen today. This is Langdon Elementary School, And Langdon Elementary School is at 1900 Evott Street Northeast. Langdon is associated with the R. Baker family, which developed the surrounding community and donated land for the school in 1928. In September 1928, municipal architect Albert Harris described the design of the school as the first of a new style of school building, consisting of two-story structures connected by a corridor on the cross-axis, at the end of which an auditorium gymnasium was placed. And this is a sign that the Woodridge Civic Association put up. If you're heading south on South Dakota Avenue, you can't help but seeing this sign in the park. And this is something that we, one of two signs we have put up to highlight our community. We got a brochure, which you can pick up and see from the back here. We have extensive information on all of the historical sites. We thank the Humanities Council for the grant.
As we draw to a close, I do want to spend a couple of minutes to introduce the other programs. Committee of 100 of the Federal City, Housing Washington, 2 Centuries of Tradition and Innovation, and the ARC project is here, and the Tacoma Theater Conservancy was here, and Chinatown Community Cultural Center. I want to thank you for your attention, and I want to thank these wonderful presentations that we've had. Remember the Neighborhood Icons Project. We will have another DC Community Heritage Program, grant program, in the spring of the year. So I hope that those of you who have been listening to these projects are inspired and will come to us for assistance. In addition to that, though, the Humanities Council has 2 grants programs. One, a cycle of workshops about the grant program beginning in February and March. So go to our website. Certainly the projects that we fund in our 2 cycles, apart from the DC Community Heritage Project, are similar in scope, and so you're certainly welcome to apply to those. Don't forget the DC Community Heritage Online Resource Directory, and keep in touch with the Humanities Council.
So, great. Thank you all for coming. This is our 8th symposium. 8th. We started the first one in June of 2005, at which time we brought together neighborhood historians and we talked about common programs. We allowed a few groups to talk about programs they were putting together in their neighborhoods. And then we broke up into small groups where people identified priorities. And the priorities they identified were, 1, they wanted to be able to come together and talk about their programs. They also wanted to have some skills. They wanted to sharpen their skills in being able to tell the history, the stories of their neighborhoods in a way that people would listen. At that time, if you remember 2005, we were in a frenzy of development. And so neighborhood names were being changed. People were coming in, reinterpreting the history. There was this fear of newcomers, changing everything. So people wanted to have the skills to be able to tell their stories. Thirdly, people wanted to be able to interact with the city, especially planning, and with developers. Fourth, people wanted to be able to talk with one another, meet with one another about their projects. And then finally, people wanted funding for their projects. And I think in the 8 sessions that we've done, the 4 years that we've been in existence, I think we have done that. Huh? Maybe not to the extent that all of you would like, but I think that we have met those goals. In the next couple of months, we're going to be rethinking how we do the program, because again, this is 4 years, 8 symposia that we've done. Some of you have been there from the beginning, Diane, Ty, Judith Bauer in the back, Eddie Becker. You've been here from the beginning, and we need to kind of rethink it. So we want to put together again, we want to expand our advisory committee. So in the next couple of months, please, if you think about it, call the Humanities Council or call the Historic Preservation Office and let us know if you want to volunteer to be on this advisory committee to kind of rethink the DC Community Heritage Project and where we want to go in the next coming years. So thank you all again, and I really appreciate the support that you all have provided the program.